How's it going, everybody? J-Mac here. Today we're gonna go over a angry chicken speed farming build. Man, this might be the most fun I've ever had with Witch Doctor. This finally gives us a very quick way to farm bounties on our own or in a group. And it's just so fun to play, dude. It's crazy good. And it's really gonna be at its best for speed farming bounties and for speed farming the machines to do Ubers. For Torment 10 Rifts, I'm not quite sure how good this is going to be. I haven't really tested it, but I doubt it's going to be that great. But this really is all about two different things. The new revamped Manajumas. Your Hex Angry Chicken explosion damage is increased by 100%, and slain enemies trigger an additional explosion. And then your Hex Angry Chicken lasts 15 seconds, and movement speed as a chicken is increased by additional 100%. So you're able to do really good AoE damage with this and move very quick through the maps. 6-piece Arachyr set, which we get a Spider Queen with a 2-piece that deals damage, which isn't the worst, does a little bit of AoE damage for you. The 4-piece, you get the Toad of Hugeness rune whenever you activate Hex, so we're running Angry Chickens, we'll still get a Toad of Hugeness when we activate our Angry Chicken. And then after the Toad of Hugeness finishes his meal, you'll heal 10% of your maximum life per second for 10 seconds, and while the Toad of Hugeness is active, you take 40% reduced damage. This is, you know, decent. You get some damage mitigation for Torment 10, which I'm a little glass cannon, so it's nice to have. The biggest issue with this is that at times the Toad will, you know, if you have a single target, the Toad will eat the single target, and you can't deal damage to it while it's inside of the Toad. So that can be kind of, you know, counteractive to what you're trying to do at times. In the 6th set, damage of your creature skills is increased by 800%. Creature skills are Corpse Spiders, Plague of Toads, Fire Bats, Locust Swarm, Hex, and Piranhas. This is going to buff your Angry Chicken damage. It's going to buff the Corpse Spiders that we're running in this build, the Fire Bats, and then we're going to go ahead and cube a Wormwood for the Locust Swarm as well. Now, in my opinion, you can kind of take the shell of running the 2-piece Manajumas and the 6-piece Arachnyrs and then mix and match abilities and different cube variations and things like that for your own liking for speed farming Torment 10 or lower. I mean, the lower you go in Torments, the more effective this is going to be, but it can very easily do Torment 10. I've tested a lot of builds and a lot of variations of this, and this is what I've settled on personally. I think is really good, but again, I feel like you can take those two sets and kind of use that as a shell and then mix and match different things, and even potentially take just the Manajuma set and maybe run it with Helltooth even, so just use this for maybe the speed part of it and then run like Helltooth variation of some sort for speed farming as well. Could definitely work. Alright, so next up we have the abilities. So we're running Corpse Spiders, Blazing Spiders. It's going to give you mana back, which at times with Plague Bats and running Pierce the Veil you may run out of mana a little bit. The big thing here though is that it's going to get buffed by the Arachyr set, and it's going to proc half of your Focus and Restraint, which the Focus and Restraint, from what I've found, is pretty important for having enough damage for speed farming in Torment 10. Fire Bats, Plague Bats is going to be mainly there for elites, champions, and bosses. Cloud of Bats may be a little bit better here as far as actual, you know, single target damage, but this has a little bit better of a range to it, as a nice cone in front of you, and I just like this ability, man. I've been wanting to run it again for a long time. It's just, it looks cool, and I like the kind of effect of it. Soul Harvest, Soul to Waste, 5% increased movement speed for each enemy harvested, so 25% additional movement speed. I like this, it's going to be kind of static on your character, so even while you're in Angry Chicken mode, you're still getting that buff, whereas things like Horrify, you need to be outside of Angry Chicken to cast the Horrify for the Stalker movement speed, or if you wanted to run Rochelle's Ring of Larceny for even more movement speed there. Spirit Walk, Jaunt, more movement speed, also 3 seconds of invulnerability, which we're not running a ton of toughness in this build, so at times this is going to be necessary. We're kind of doing a little bit of a balancing act as far as damage, movement speed, and toughness goes for Torment 10 to make it efficient enough, so at times you get in a little bit of sticky situations, so Jaunt's nice there. Got the Hex Angry Chicken, again transform into an Angry Chicken for up to 2 seconds that can explode for 1,350% weapon damage as physical to all enemies within 12 yards. Then the Manajuma set, of course, making this last longer and have kind of a chain reaction of explosions. And kind of how this ability works is you go into Angry Chicken mode and then you hit it again to explode, which For the most part, it's not a big problem, but at times you want to just go into Angry Chicken and explode right away for damage, and so there's a little bit of a delay there, which is maybe the biggest problem with the build in general. Summon Zombie Dog's lifelink. 10% of the damage done to you goes to your dogs, and this is also just going to proc our Fierce Loyalty for more movement speed. That's why I'm running this. You could definitely run other runes like Chilled to the Bone or something along those lines. Spirit Vessel for another second life. We're moving so quickly through the rifts that, you know, certain things are going to hit you that maybe shouldn't, and it's nice just to get that second life so you don't have any downtime. Pierce the Veil for more damage. Grave Injustice for the cooldown reduction. Cooldown reduction is pretty important for the Hex Angry Chicken. A lot of times, if you have around 35 to 40% CDR on your gear, you just, you know, maybe explode one group of mobs with Hex Angry Chicken, and then it's, boom, it's back, just like that. Confidence Ritual. This is the new passive. You deal 25% additional damage to enemies within 20 yards. You're pretty much going to always be within 20 yards dealing damage. The only thing that's really outside of that is going to be like your Locust Swarm at times is going to tick outside of the 20 yards. But otherwise, you're getting this damage buff pretty much all the time. And then we're running a Hellfire Amulet, and we're running Fierce Loyalty on that for more movement speed. Let's take a look at the items next. So we got the Manajuma's Carving Knife here. Definitely want to make sure this is ancient. You could have a CDR roll over the Vitality, would probably be fine there, but the ancient part is very important for T10. Got the Manajuma's Gory Fetch. Now you see this doesn't have any skill percentage on it, so it could be much better rerolling the mana regen to say either Plague Bats damage or Locust Swarm damage would be fine. At some point in time, I'm hoping they add Hex damage as a rollable ability onto here. That'd be nice to buff the Angry Chicken, but right now, again, either Plague Bats or the Locust Swarm would be fine. As far as Aracyhr's pieces, we have the helmet here with Int, Vitality, Crit Chance, and a CDR gem. The Vitality could be Plague Bats damage. Got the shoulders. You really want Int, Vit, cooldown reduction, and Locust Swarm damage there. Got Int, Vit, Locust Swarm damage in 3 sockets on the chest piece. As far as the pants go, Int, Vitality, Armor, and 2 sockets, and it's really good to get pickup radius on these pieces, because in this build we're not running Thing of the Deep, so you want to get to around 8 to 10 pickup radius if you can, so getting that as a secondary is very nice. And then we've got the gloves with intelligence, crit damage, crit chance, and again you want that CDR roll there. As far as the rest of the pieces go, we've got the focus and restraint combo, so focus, then the restraint. So one part of that's being procced by your Corpse Spiders, and the other one is going to be Plague Bats. And then we've got the Hellfire Amulet with Fierce Loyalty, Poison, Crit Chance, Crit Damage, and a socket. This could also be Intelligence instead of Poison damage, that's totally fine. And then we've got the Crim's Buff Belt. Gain 25% run speed, this effect is lost for 5 seconds after taking damage. We'll go over the cube items here in just a minute, and we'll go over some variations as far as what belts to run and bracers and things like that. We are running the Coils of the First Spider. While channeling Fire Bats, you take 30% reduced damage and gain life per hit. I found that my sustain was relatively low whenever I had to stop to kill elites or champions and bosses. This gave me good mitigation and gave me a lot of life back while channeling Plague Bats. And honestly, the build did not run very well until I added this. I tried to run it without it for a very long time, and once I added this, it's like things kind of started to click. I think it's pretty important personally, but you may be able to figure out a way to not run it. What I'm thinking off the top of my head is maybe running a gold wrap here instead, potentially, to get your damage mitigation that way. But you got to keep those gold stacks, you know, picking up the gold to keep the gold wrap going, so I'm not quite sure. As far as legendary gems go, definitely Bane of the Trapped. You're going to be in melee to proc this almost all the time. And then I'm running Bane of the Powerful, which could definitely be like Gem of Efficacious Toxin, or even the new Bane of the Stricken if you're playing Season 4 would be very, very good. But you should have this buff most of the time and get extra damage versus elites. And then I'm running Boon of the Hoarder. Again, you want like 8 to 10 pickup radius to make Boon of the Hoarder good enough to run, just for more movement speed more than anything else. Next up we have the Kanai's Cube abilities. So we're running Wormwood in the weapon slot. I like this quite a bit. It's just going to deal passive damage for you. You don't have to actually cast the Locust Swarm, which is nice. Then we're running the Quetzalcoatl to buff the Locust Swarm even more. You could definitely run some other things here, which we'll go over in just a minute. And then we got the Convention of Elements in the Jewelry slot. about 200% extra damage. And a good trick with this build, the one problem this build has really is bosses. The bosses in bounties can take a little while to kill, but the speed of everything else really makes up for that. But what you want to make sure that you do is that you hit the bosses with angry chicken explosions. When this rotates around to poison, it's going to deal considerable damage, and then otherwise you're casting your blazing spiders and your plague bats and things like that, you know, to do the rest of the damage to the bosses. But that will speed the bosses up considerably if you wait and time your Convention of Elements rotations properly. As far as other items you could run a furnace here instead of the wormwood. I did that for quite a while, and it's, you know, pretty decent. I think the wormwood overall is better, though. It's going to give you damage against everything, not just elites and champions and bosses. And then you could also run a Harrington Wasteguard instead of the Quetzalcoatl. I think is a very good option. The problem with that is you have to find clickable objects for it, and I kind of got to a point where I just decided it didn't feel all that worth it. I was killing things so fast anyways and moving so quickly that looking around for clickables just kind of felt, I don't know, it just kind of was something else that I had to do in the build that I didn't really feel like doing. But it is very good. Your damage is going to be extremely high, and you can get to a point where if you find a clickable, you can just one-shot elites and champions with Angry Chicken very easily, which you can do sometimes anyways, but you know, with the Harrington Wasteguard, you definitely could do that. Another option would be to get rid of the Crim's buff belt on your character and put that into the cube, and then run, say, you'd probably run like a Witching Hour for more crit damage there, because you can't cube the Witching Hour's ability, because it's not a legendary effect, it's just, it has crit damage on it. So you could wear the Witching Hour and then cube the Crim's buff belt there. And I think Convention of Elements is really just, for the most part, the only way to go as far as jewelry slots. I'm sure there's other things you could do, but I think the damage is just too good to not run it. As far as Paragon points go, get as much movement speed as you need. I have none on my gear, so I need a 25%. Then go Intelligence. Offense-wise, crit chance, crit damage, cooldown reduction, then attack speed. Defense-wise, armor percentage, life percentage, all resist, life regen. And then utility-wise, life on hit, area damage, resource cost reduction, and then gold find. So there you go, guys. There's the build. I hope you enjoy it. It is a lot of fun to play. It's going to make Witch Doctor much more enjoyable for bounty farming in the next patch, and it's really built for that, and again, like I said, for farming the machines, the infernal machines, to do uber bosses. And you may even want more movement speed, honestly, for the uber bosses, and you can add more movement speed for even bounty farming too if you want. I feel like this is a pretty good mix of move speed and damage, though, personally. But, you know, play around with it like I said before. So anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm going to leave you with a little bit more gameplay, as you can see it in full screen action. And thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Perfect strike.